My wife threw my clothes on the floor and told me to leave our house just because I asked her brother to finally contribute something. She thought I would come crawling back, but instead, I let her discover what life really looks like without me. When I opened the door to my own home that afternoon and saw my clothes scattered on the floor, a strange heaviness settled in my chest. The neat piles I had left in the morning were gone. In their place, shirts, pants, and even my work jacket lay in a messy heap by the entrance, as if I were nothing more than an unwanted guest. My wife was standing there with her arms crossed, her face tense with determination. "You're not sleeping here tonight," she said harshly. "Find somewhere else. Think about how you treat my brother." Her words hit me harder than the sight of my belongings on the floor. Just a few hours earlier, I had left for work believing we were a family, perhaps struggling, but still united. Now I was being evicted from my own home, not by a landlord or a boss, but by the woman I had promised to build a life with. And all this because I dared to ask her brother, a grown man in his late 20s, perfectly capable of working to contribute something, anything, to the house he had been living in for free. For months, he had eaten our food, used our electricity, lounged on our couch watching endless television, and left his dirty dishes in the sink as if we were running a free motel. I didn't yell at him, I didn't insult him, I simply stated the obvious. If you want to live here, you have to help, either with expenses or with chores. It's only fair. But justice was not what my wife wanted to hear. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, torn between anger and disbelief. My own home, where my hard-earned salary covered every bill, every meal, every repair. And suddenly, I was the outsider. My wife's brother, Mark, didn't even look at me. He was sitting comfortably on the couch, one arm resting lazily on the backrest and a smirk on his lips, as if he had been waiting for this moment. And it was in his eyes that I saw it for the first time. Satisfaction. He had gotten what he wanted. He had driven a wedge between us. "I'm leaving," I finally said, my voice lower than I expected. "But this isn't over." I grabbed a few things from the pile, enough to get through the night, and walked out, closing the door behind me with a calm that felt unnatural. Inside, my emotions were a storm: pain, betrayal, and a silent, growing anger. That night, sitting alone in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, her words replayed over and over in my mind. "Think about how you treat my brother." I thought about it all night, staring at the cracked ceiling, my mind racing in circles. By the time dawn broke and pale light filtered through the dirty blinds, something inside me had shifted. If she wanted me out, fine. But if she thought I was going to quietly surrender the life I had built, the house I had paid for, the future I had imagined, she was wrong. The next morning I returned, and that's when everything began to unravel. When I walked back into the house that morning, the air was thick with silence. My wife was in the kitchen making coffee as if nothing had happened, while her brother was still in the living room, occupying the space like a king on his throne. His feet were on the coffee table with a half-eaten bowl of cereal propped on the arm of the sofa. Neither of them greeted me. It was as if I had already been demoted to a mere guest. I set my travel bag down by the door and said quietly, "We need to talk." My wife didn't even look up from the coffee maker. "Talk about what?" "You left last night. That was your decision." I held back the urge to laugh. "My decision?" She had literally thrown my clothes into the hallway, but I kept my composure because rage wasn't going to help me. "About us," I replied calmly. "About the fact that your brother has been living here for months without lifting a finger while I pay the mortgage, the bills, the food. I'm not asking for anything unreasonable, I'm asking for respect." At that, Mark snorted. "Respect? You think you can buy respect with your salary? This is family, man. You don't put a price on family." I turned to face him fully. Family helps each other. Family doesn't take advantage. His smile widened, and for an instant, I saw triumph flash across his face. He wanted this argument, he fed on it, and worst of all, my wife was on his side. "Mark is right," she said, finally turning to me. Her tone was hard, her eyes cold. He's my brother. He's been through a lot. He needs a place to stay. I'm not going to let you bully him into paying rent like he's a stranger. I took a deep breath, feeling my chest tighten. This isn't about rent, it's about responsibility. If he can't contribute money, then let him do the groceries or handle the chores, something, anything. I'm not going to support a freeloader. But every word seemed to push her further away. She was no longer listening to reason. She was defending her brother with blind loyalty, and I was the enemy. Mark leaned back and crossed his arms. Maybe you should move out if you have such a problem. I mean, we're happy here. We don't need your negativity. For a moment, I froze. The audacity stunned me. Happy here, in my house, with my money, with my wife. I could feel the blood burning in my veins, but I forced myself to stay calm because I understood something important. They both thought they had already won, that I would either accept the humiliation or leave quietly, surrendering everything I had built. That was their mistake. Maybe you're right, I said slowly, forcing a small smile. Maybe I do need to think things over. I picked up my bag again, but this time I wasn't heading to another motel. No, this time I left with a different purpose, because I finally understood that if they wanted a war, they had picked the wrong man to fight it with. And as I walked out into the cold morning breeze, the first pieces of my plan began to take shape. I drove aimlessly for a while, the hum of the engine soothing my thoughts. I had always reacted with anger first, but this time I knew I couldn't afford to let it consume me. This wasn't just a marital argument, it was a test of whether I was going to let myself be pushed out of my own life. I pulled into a quiet park and sat on a bench, watching the morning joggers and parents with strollers. Their ordinary routines made my situation feel surreal. Yesterday, I was a husband coming home from work. Today, a man displaced from his own house. I thought about the years of extra shifts, the nights on call, the promotions that had finally allowed us to buy that house. Every inch of it had been built with my effort, and now a man who contributed nothing was telling me to leave. I opened my phone and started scrolling through old photos, vacations with my wife, birthdays, parties. In every picture, I thought we were happy, but now I noticed something else. Mark was in most of them too, always in the background, always present, as if he had taken root in our lives long before I noticed. That revelation hit me harder than I expected. Maybe this wasn't sudden. Maybe I had been ignoring the signs for too long. I closed the photo gallery and opened my banking app. My name was on every important account, the mortgage, the utilities, the car. My salary funded everything. If they wanted to act like I was irrelevant, then maybe it was time for them to experience what life was actually like without me. That thought calmed me, giving me a strange sense of control. I didn't need to fight in the living room or shout in the kitchen. Quiet, carefully made decisions would speak louder than any confrontation. Still, a part of me ached. I loved my wife, or at least I thought I did. But love doesn't mean choosing someone else's comfort over your partner's dignity. Love doesn't mean kicking out your husband so your brother can stay. When I got up from that bench, I was no longer the same man who had left the night before with his clothes in a bag. I was steadier, focused. If they wanted me gone, I would show them exactly what it felt like for me to be gone. The next few days felt like walking through a strange dream. I didn't go back to the house immediately. Instead, I stayed in a modest rental on the other side of town. It wasn't fancy, just a small furnished apartment with creaky floors and peeling paint. But it gave me space. Space to think, to breathe, and most importantly, to plan. Every evening after work, I sat at the wobbly table with my laptop open, looking at the numbers, my salary, our joint account, the bills, the mortgage. Slowly, methodically, I began to separate what was ours from what was mine. I had always been generous, too generous. When we got married, I added her to my accounts. I gave her access to credit cards, trusting her completely. That trust had now been used as a weapon against me, but I wasn't defenseless. I still had my individual savings account, the one I had quietly maintained for emergencies. She didn't know the exact balance, but it was enough to keep me stable if things got worse. The more I analyzed, the clearer the picture became. They couldn't survive without me. The mortgage payments came from my account, the utilities were in my name, even the grocery card was linked to my paycheck. My wife's income was small, just a few hours at a retail store. Her brother didn't even work. So why did they think they could kick me out? Because they assumed I would keep paying, no matter how they treated me. That night, looking at the numbers, I understood the truth. My revenge didn't need to be loud, it didn't require shouting or slamming doors. All I had to do was step back and let reality speak for me. But before I took a drastic step, I wanted clarity. Was my wife truly blind to what she was doing, or had she chosen her brother over me a long time ago? The following night, I returned to the house silently, at a time when I knew they wouldn't expect me. My key still worked. The lights were on, and laughter spilled from the living room. I stopped in the hallway, hidden, listening. Mark's voice came first. He'll come crawling back. You'll see. He doesn't have the guts to really leave. He needs you. My wife's laugh followed. Maybe, but for once I feel like we're in control. It's always him making the decisions, always talking about money. I'm tired of it. It's good to have you here. Her words hurt more than I expected. It wasn't just loyalty to her brother, it was resentment toward me, a resentment I didn't even know was growing. I backed away silently before they could notice me. My chest heavy, my mind racing, so it was true, they were united against me. I drove back to the small apartment. I sat at the wobbly table and opened my laptop again, but this time, there was no hesitation. I started drafting the steps, redirecting my salary to my individual account, canceling the grocery card, putting a hold on the utilities until further notice, consulting a lawyer about the mortgage and division of assets. It was all so simple. And the beautiful thing was this, I didn't have to tell them anything. I closed the computer and leaned back, a strange calm settling over me. They wanted me to think about how I treated her brother. Fine, I had thought about it. And soon, they would be the ones forced to think about how they treated me. The storm wasn't raging yet, but it was forming silently, with certainty. The first real move I made was subtle. I redirected my paycheck. Instead of flowing into the joint account where my wife had free access, it now went to my individual account, the one she knew little about. It only took a few clicks, but the ripple it would create would be enormous. 2 weeks passed before I heard anything. During that time, I remained silent, living in the small apartment, going to work as usual, pretending nothing had changed. My phone would vibrate with occasional messages from my wife. When are you coming back? We need to talk. Are you being stubborn? I didn't reply. Silence became my shield. Then one night, my phone rang. This time, she didn't bother with pleasantries. The mortgage payment was declined, she blurted out, furious. What's going on? I kept my voice calm. I told you I needed time to think. I guess the bank account needed time to think too. There was a pause on the line, followed by the faint sound of her brother's voice in the background. I could almost picture him there, feeding her lines. You can't just stop paying, she finally said, her tone rising. This is our house, our life. Our house, I repeated, letting the silence stretch. That's funny, because lately, it felt like I was just a guest in your house. Remember the night you threw my clothes on the floor and told me to leave? Her breath hitched for a moment. I thought maybe she would apologize, but her tone hardened. You're overreacting. Mark needed a place to stay, and you turned it into a power struggle. This is petty. Maybe, I said quietly. Or maybe it's just fair. I hung up before she could respond. That night, sitting in the dim light of the apartment, I thought about how quickly love could curdle into coldness. I had given her everything, me trust, my money, my partnership. And now, when the balance of power shifted just slightly, she revealed how fragile her loyalty truly was. The following days brought more frantic messages. She called twice to tell me the utility bills hadn't gone through. Then came the text, "You expect me to cover all of this by myself? With what money?" I didn't answer because that was the point. She couldn't. And deep down, I think she was starting to understand just how much of her comfortable life had been built on the foundation of my efforts. Still, I knew this wasn't the end. The pressure was building, and soon something would break. And when it did, I planned to be ready. By the third week, the cracks were visible, even from a distance. My wife was calling more frequently now, not out of love, but out of necessity. The cheerful tone she used to have was gone, replaced by frustration, sometimes panic. One night, she left a voicemail I listened to 3 times. "Listen, I can't keep this up. The power company is threatening to shut us off. The grocery card doesn't work anymore. Mark is trying to find a job, but you know it's hard. Can't we please just talk this out?" For the first time in weeks, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the image of my clothes dumped on the floor, the smirk on her brother's face, the sound of their laughter as they ridiculed me in my own living room. No, pity had no place here. At work, I carried on as usual. My colleagues had no idea about the storm brewing in my personal life. They joked at lunch, complained about deadlines, and I smiled along with them, all while knowing I was fighting a private war. My calm exterior was my armor. I did, however, meet with a lawyer, a quiet, meticulous man named David who asked few questions but gave clear answers. He explained the situation with the mortgage, the rights tied to my name, and the protections I still had. His composure reassured me. I wasn't cornered, I had far more leverage than they imagined. "Take your time," David advised me. "Don't act rashly. Pressure reveals the truth. Let's see how they handle it." And so I did. A few days later, another call came. This time my wife's voice was sharper, almost accusatory. "Are you enjoying this? Watching us struggle while you're comfortable somewhere else?" I let a second of silence pass before answering. "I'm not enjoying it, but I am learning. Learning what my presence meant, what my effort was worth." "You're punishing me for loving my brother," she shot back. "No," I said quietly. "I'm showing you what happens when you choose him over me." The line went silent after that, but I knew she had heard me. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly, not because the war was over, but because I could feel the tide was turning. The next weekend, curiosity got the better of me. I drove by the house late at night, parking across the street where shadows covered my car. The porch light flickered weakly, and the blinds were half drawn. Through a crack, I saw movement inside. My wife was pacing with the phone in her hand while Mark lounged on the couch with a video game controller. Even from a distance, the tension was palpable. She was gesturing sharply, her voice raised, though muffled by the glass. He, in contrast, just shrugged, his eyes never leaving the screen. The scene told me everything I needed to know. The pressure was working. 2 days later, my phone vibrated with a message from her. "We need to meet. Just you and me." I agreed. We met at a quiet diner on the edge of town. She looked tired, with hastily applied makeup to hide the dark circles under her eyes. For the first time in months, she wasn't acting like someone with the upper hand. She started without preamble. "This can't go on. I can't keep paying for everything. You know I can't. And Mark is trying, but he hasn't found anything steady yet." I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the cream swirl. "So, now you understand what I was saying. One person carrying everything isn't sustainable. I asked for help. You kicked me out instead." Her lips tightened. I overreacted. I was just trying to protect him. By destroying us? I asked softly. The word seemed to sting her. She looked away, clutching her mug. I don't want to lose our marriage. It was strange hearing her say it. Weeks ago, she had chosen her brother without hesitation. Now, with the walls closing in, she suddenly remembered what we had built together. But I was no longer the same man she had cast aside. The marriage, I said carefully. It's not about one person sacrificing everything while the other defends someone who refuses to grow up. If we're going to survive this, things have to change. Radically. She nodded too quickly, as if agreeing was the only rope she had left to cling to. But her eyes flickered with hesitation, and I knew then that she wanted me back, but not enough to truly stand up to him. As we left the diner, she reached for my hand. I let her fingers brush against mine, but I didn't squeeze back, because in my heart, I already knew this wasn't about reconciliation. It was about survival. And soon, survival would demand choices she wasn't ready to make. After the meeting at the diner, I didn't rush back. I could see she expected me to follow her home, to resume my role as the provider while she clung to her brother's excuses. But I wasn't going to fall into the same trap again. Instead, I let more time pass. I had learned that silence was more powerful than any argument. A week later, she showed up at my small apartment unannounced. When I opened the door, I saw the tension etched on her face. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair disheveled. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. Please, she said simply, walking in without waiting for an invitation. We can't go on like this. The bills, the food. The stress is tearing everything apart. Mark is still looking for a job, but... Her voice trailed off, and for the first time, she didn't sound defensive. She sounded defeated. I motioned for her to sit, but I didn't soften my voice. So you want me to come back and fix everything while he stays? Her hands twisted in her lap. He's family. I can't just throw him out on the street. And I'm not. I asked quietly. She flinched but didn't answer. I leaned back, studying her. Do you remember the night you told me to leave? You chose him without a second thought. You threw our marriage away to protect someone who refuses to protect himself. You laughed at me with him in our own living room. Do you think I can just forget that? Tears welled in her eyes. I wasn't laughing at you. I was angry. I felt like you controlled everything with the money. Money, I shook my head. It wasn't money, it was responsibility. The roof over our heads, the lights, the food, those weren't gifts, they were the basics of life. And I carried all of it. You let him ridicule me, and now you've seen what happens without it. She buried her face in her hands. For a long time, the room was silent except for her muffled sobs. A part of me wanted to comfort her, but another part, the part that had spent weeks in exile while they lived off my sacrifices, kept me firm. This was no longer about sympathy, it was about truth. Finally, she looked up. Her voice was small, shaky. What do you want me to do? The question hung in the air. It was the first time she had asked me. Not demanded, not accused, asked. I let the silence stretch, making sure she felt its weight. Then I spoke slowly, with clarity. I want you to decide who your family really is. Because if it's him, then you and I are already finished. If it's me, then things have to change completely. No more parasites, no more disrespect, and no more choosing him over us. Her eyes widened as if the ultimatum had shocked her, but I had no other choice. I had been patient, I had been quiet, and I had shown her what life was like without me. Now it was her turn to face the decision she had avoided for too long. She opened her mouth to respond but closed it again, looking at the floor. And in that silence, I understood that the real climax wasn't what I would do, but what she was capable of doing. The days following her visit stretched long and uncomfortable. She didn't give me an answer that night, and I didn't press her. Instead, I let her return to the house where Mark was still sitting on my couch, eating food bought with money that no longer came from my pocket. Her text messages became more fragmented, almost desperate. "We need to talk again. Mark says he'll find something soon." I'm trying to hold everything together. I noticed a detail, however: she was no longer accusing me. The sharp edges of her words had softened. Now, they carried something more like fear. One evening, I drove by the house again. This time, the windows were dark except for a dim glow in the kitchen. A single bulb illuminated my wife sitting at the table, her head in her hands, while Mark paced back and forth, yelling. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. The body language was enough. He was frustrated, cornered, taking out his anger. She was overwhelmed. And for the first time, I saw the shift I had been waiting for. Their alliance was cracking. The next morning, she called. Her voice was exhausted. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "I told Mark he has to leave. He screamed at me. Called me selfish. But I don't care. I can't keep destroying everything for him." Her words settled over me slowly, like the tide. Part of me felt relief, part of me sadness. It shouldn't have taken so much pain for her to realize what I had known from the beginning. "So," I said carefully, "you've made your decision." "Yes," she whispered. "I choose you. If you'll still have me." The silence stretched between us. I thought of the laughter I had heard weeks ago, of the image of my belongings carelessly tossed on the floor, of the sting of betrayal in her eyes as she took his side. Could I trust her again? That question was still lingering in my mind when I ended the call with a quiet, "We'll see." Because forgiveness, I knew, wasn't something I could hand over as easily as a paycheck. When I finally walked back into the house, it felt different. The energy that had once been thick with arrogance and defiance was gone. Mark's shoes were no longer by the door. His clutter no longer littered the living room. The silence that greeted me was heavy, but it was mine. My wife was in the kitchen, her eyes red from crying. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "He's gone." I nodded slowly, setting my keys on the table. "And what about us?" She took a hesitant step toward me, as if afraid I would push her away. "I want us to come back. I want to fix what I broke." Her voice trembled, and for the first time, it sounded sincere. Not defensive, not angry, just vulnerable. I looked around the house, remembering the nights I'd spent away, the weeks of silence, the pain of being cast out of the life I had built. I remembered the motel ceiling, the empty apartment, the sound of their laughter at my expense. "I'm not sure I can forget," I said quietly, "but I can try. On one condition." She held her breath. "Anything. No more secrets. No more choosing him or anyone else over us. If you want this marriage to survive, you have to be with me, not against me." She nodded quickly, almost desperately. "I will. I promise." Her words were soft, but I knew promises were easy. Trust, on the other hand, would take a long time to rebuild. That night, as we sat at the same kitchen table where so many arguments had erupted, there was no shouting, no laughter at my expense, just silence. Heavy, but cleansing. I didn't need revenge in the form of screams or triumphs. My revenge had already happened silently, over weeks of absence. She had lived without me, without my support, without my presence. She had chosen her brother, and reality had shown her the cost. In the end, my victory wasn't in forcing her to see, it was in letting her live with her decision long enough to regret it. And as I sipped my coffee the next morning, with the house at peace for the first time in months, I knew. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply to step back and let the truth do the work for you.